Some backstory. I am a female in my early 20s, and I moved to Belfast from Sweden a few years ago. The taxi prices here are so much better than the ones where I'm from, and for a good year and a half, I relied on taxis getting me pretty much everywhere, including to and from work. I usually tell this story to my friends and family as a funny story whenever I have a few drinks in me, or someone brings it up, but to be honest with you, I was completely horrified when it happened. So about a year and a half ago, I was out for drinks with a friend of mine and her friend that was visiting from abroad and was staying at my house since I had a spare room. For some reason, they went home before me and I was left by myself at the bar, which I know is a really dumb thing to do. After an hour or so, a few drinks and a failed attempt at picking someone up, I decided it was time to call it a night. I usually book taxis, as there are a few handy apps, but with it being a pay weekend, there was no way I'd be able to get a car. So I walked outside, hoping for the best. The moment I get outside, I'm approached by an older man, white hair and on the heavier side, asking if I need a taxi, so cheerfully I accepted. Thanking my lucky stars that I'll be home very soon. This taxi didn't belong to a taxi company, which immediately was a bit strange, but I've taken those before with friends without an issue. Right off the bat, the driver starts asking me the usual questions, like where I'm from and how long I've been in town, if I'm studying or I'm working, what brings me here, and so on. Then, he asked me if I've ever been on a black taxi tour. These tours are quite famous here, and they're usually meant to be really good, showing off all the murals of the city and the Peace Wall and such. You also get stories from the people that grew up here during the Troubles. I said no because I haven't had the opportunity yet, but I told him I will definitely get it as soon as I can. He then suggests that when we get to my house that he'll give me a tour. It's not a black taxi, but for free, right now, in the middle of the night. Being the way too nice idiot I am, I hear myself saying, yeah, sure, that'd be nice. When what I really meant was hell no, dude. So he starts driving out of town, down countryside roads, and not at all in the direction of any of the murals, and on the other side of town from the Peace Wall. His questions get more personal, asking if I have a boyfriend, and if I have family around, and if I live by myself. He then says, we can be friends. You'd like that, wouldn't you? He has this creepy laugh going on while repeating the phrase over and over again, nudging my side with his arm. He keeps driving in the middle of nowhere, talking about how his footpath was this and that, connecting to another footpath and so on, while dropping the we can be friends thing in between, still laughing this creepy laugh. At this point, we're about 20 minutes outside of town, and the street lights stop. It's pitch black out. I'm clutching my phone, ready to call the police, and looking at the dashboard GPS to see my nearby location names. Getting ready to tuck and roll out of the car, completely freaked out by him, I'm finally able to stutter out that I'm getting a bit tired and it's time to go to bed. He agrees to take me home and turns around. We pull up outside my house again, and I feel a wave of relief washing over me, like I can finally breathe again. I pay him for the taxi ride and get ready to get out of the car. He then turns the car off, takes off his seatbelt and keeps talking, turning slightly so he's kind of half facing me. After a few minutes of talking, him still talking about being friends, I say that I need to use the bathroom and thank him for the tour. He tells me to hurry back outside so we can continue the conversation. I bolt inside, lock the doors, and keep the hall light turned off. I look out through the peephole and can see that he's still sitting there in his car. About 15 minutes passes and he finally drives away, and I just sort of collapse on the floor, beating myself up for being so stupid. Needless to say, after that, I've never taken a taxi I haven't booked since. We had just moved into a brand new house in a brand new housing development. A lot of the houses around us were either unfurnished or had families that had just moved in. Behind our house was a lot of field, mostly for future houses. We lived in a fairly safe small city, and the housing development was very quiet, so for the first few years we lived there, we were never bothered to lock the doors. Even at night most of the time, it was just something we didn't think about. My parents had just put in hardwood floor, so the house was pretty echoey, and it was a single story. One night, I was laying in bed trying to fall asleep, and I thought I heard the back sliding glass door open. I was up late on the internet, but everyone else was asleep, so the house was quiet. I had my door slightly open so my cat could come and go, and so I knew that I was definitely hearing something. I froze, hoping it wasn't the door, but a moment later, I heard it slide shut. Then, I began to hear what sounded like heavy shoes walking across the hardwood floor. It was a very specific sound, and suddenly, I couldn't breathe. The footsteps were slow and quiet, like they were trying to make as little noise as possible, but because the floor was wood and our house had high ceilings, the steps echoed down the hallway to my room. Then I heard them stop. The sound of the hallway closet being opened, and then the door quietly clicking shut, like they turned the knob and then pulled the door closed, and then released the knob. It was silent after that. My heart was beating so fast, and I began crying. The only way to my parents' room was up the hallway. Their door was only about 20 feet away from where that hallway closet was. I was frozen, and I honestly thought I would pee my pants. I was so scared. However, it was silent for long enough that I knew I had to get my dad, so I stood up and walked sock-footed to my door. I stood there for a long time breathing, and then I ran. It's not a long hallway, but I went as fast as I could. I got inside the room and tried to wake my dad up. "Dad! Dad!" I was frantically whispering. "Huh?" He was half asleep. "Dad!" "What?" he responded. "I think there's someone in the house." "What?" he said. "Get up. I think there's someone in the house." "There's no one in here. Go back to sleep." "Yes, there is." And I start crying. That gets him up. My mom also wakes up at this point as well. So they both get out of bed. My dad, sure that there's no one in the house, doesn't even grab something as a weapon. But I follow behind him as he leaves the room. He goes into the living room and passes the closet and turns on all the lights in the house. I remember standing in the living room, knowing exactly where the person was and not being able to say anything. He tells me, "Look, there's no one." He doesn't check the closet though, and I don't tell him to. I'm so afraid that whoever's in there will jump out with a knife and kill my dad in front of me. So I say nothing, and I don't tell him to check the closet. I don't know why he didn't, because if I were a dad, I would've. He locks the front door and tells me to go back to bed. They wait until I'm back in my room before they close their own bedroom door and go back to sleep. Again, the house is silent, and I'm laying there afraid because that person is still in the one place he didn't look. Suddenly, I hear the closet door open, just as slowly and as quietly as before. Then, the footsteps again. I could hear them so clearly, walking towards the kitchen where the back door is, and they stop. That's followed by the sound of the back door being slid open, and then quietly being pushed closed again. I hear the back door click into place, and then the house is silent. I'm lying there crying and breathing, but hear them leave the house. I felt instant relief though, and I was still shaking with fear. I give it a few minutes, hoping that they wouldn't come back, and they don't. So after a bit, I sneak out there. My one and only thought is to lock the back door, which I managed to do so, but the scariest part was that when I looked at the hall closet door, it wasn't closed anymore. It was cracked, because they hadn't bothered to close it after they left. I know it was definitely closed when my dad was out there with me. I tried bringing it up to them a few years later, but they still didn't believe me. This happened about 6 months ago. I was 22 at the time, and my daughter was only 4. I lived in a 2-story house with just me, my daughter, and my husband. I was taking at-home classes to be an iPhone specialist, starting at 5 p.m. and ending at 10 p.m. Monday through Friday. My husband left for his 2 weeks of training he does every year for the military, so it's just me and my daughter and our pit bull mix, Mavis. I had just finished my classes for the week, and I had the weekend free, so I decided to go to my mother's house until Sunday. I packed up my stuff and my daughter's stuff, and we went for the weekend. We returned home Sunday to find someone had broken into our house. There are muddy footprints and windows open, but nothing was missing. I was just going to call the police, but my sister's husband explains that the cops wouldn't do anything. Nothing happened that night, but the next day, my mother came over to pick up my daughter so I could do my classes without having to worry about her, and they left. And I went to watch the class upstairs. I put headphones on so I could hear my instructor teach the class, but swear I keep hearing stuff downstairs. I even text my mom and told her that I heard stuff downstairs and it was creeping me out. But she assured me it was probably just Mavis because everything was locked up tight and no one could get in. I agreed, thinking I was probably just freaking myself out. I continued listening to my instructor teach, and I could swear I heard footsteps on the stairs, so I hurry up and take my headset off and listen, and I didn't hear anything. I walked down the stairs and didn't see anything either, so I went back to class. At 10 p.m., my class was over, and my mom decided to just keep my daughter for the night. I was doing my homework with Mavis upstairs with me, and all of a sudden, she starts barking and growling and ran downstairs. Now, Mavis usually barks and growls at the slightest noise outside, so I didn't think much of it, but I decided I would go check it out anyway because of what happened while I was at my mother's. Again, nothing out of the ordinary, so I went back upstairs. I was finally done with my homework, and it's about midnight, so I went downstairs and called my mom like I do every night. We were talking, and I decided to open my daughter's door and peek my head in. I don't know why I did this, because my daughter was at my mom's house for the night. Just a habit, I guess. I should have mentioned earlier that when you look in my daughter's room, her bed is on the far wall, a good ways away from the door, so you can clearly see under the bed. I opened the door, and to my horror, a man was under the bed. I just froze and didn't move. Just stood there in shock. After what felt like minutes, I slowly shut the door and whispered into my phone to my mom, "There's a man in my house, under my daughter's bed." My mom was terrified, and she screamed at me to get outside and stay on the phone with her. She had my brother call the police, so I ran outside with Mavis and waited for the police to arrive. About 3 minutes later, they came and searched my house and found no one, but they discovered my bathroom window was open and happened to shine their light into the living room and could clearly see 2 huge handprints where they slid the window down. The cops waited for my mom and brother to get there, and while they were waiting, they told me about this man that usually stays 2 houses down from mine with his parents. Both of his parents have a pretty bad drug habit, and this guy has been known to put women in the hospital and trying to kill them. What scares me even more is since we have bought this house, my daughter has been terrified and always told my mom that she wanted to stay with her because it wasn't safe at mommy's house. I didn't think too much of it because I thought maybe it was just a new place, and you know how kids are with these new places. After this whole thing happened, I stayed with my mom until my husband came home. We decided to ask our daughter about the house, and what she told me absolutely terrified me. She said that at night, while her dad and I sleep, monsters come to the window and try to get in. She says it's a boy monster and a girl. The next day we installed alarms on all the windows and security lights. I can't stop questioning why. Why was this man under my daughter's bed? Was he waiting for me to go to sleep? Was he waiting for my mom to bring my daughter back home and I put her to bed? I get sick to my stomach thinking about what could have happened.